associate director of admissions at Northfield Mount Hermon School in Massachusetts. As you can see also on here, I'm the arts and academics liaison. And what that means is that in our office, we have an athletics liaison. A couple of years ago, I thought, why are we just promoting the athletics? We also promote the arts, and we promote the academics as well. So I took on that role as well to kind of help our school really kind of recruit some of the stronger arts and academic students. I've been at NMH now. This is my 13th year, and this is my 19th year working in the admissions world. Prior to this, I was in college admissions, so I really started to understand what the whole idea of recruitment meant. But coming to a boarding school, you take on a lot more roles, right? And so we think about that also not in terms of what faculty do, but what roles do students play in the school. A lot of times what we say is when we're looking for students, we want to find a good fit, right? And the idea of a good fit can mean a lot of different things. People say we want to see engagement. Well, what does that mean, right? We want to see good community members, and we want to see intellectually curious students. These things are all very general, right? So what I'm trying to do is deepen our understanding of what this means. And obviously I'm going to be open for some questions in the end. When we talk about fit, we're really talking about two things. I see academic fit and social fit, right? So students obviously have strong grades. We're looking at test scores, yada, 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 but that's not all we look for in the academics. I want to know, how does a student learn? What type of environment are they in right now, right? Are they in an IB curriculum? Are they in an AP curriculum? Are they in a different type of school? Are they in a more hands-on? Are they a small school, large school? What does their environment look like, and how might that fit into our school? They might want something totally different, and that's fine as well. What challenges students, right? What are the things that they're looking for? If they have certain challenges, does the school offer the right amount of support, right? So if you're looking at a school, you want to start asking those questions. How is my son or daughter going to be supported throughout the entire curriculum? The social fit, we talk a lot about being mission aligned. Again, that's a little bit vague. What it means really is, what are the values that the student has or the family has, right? How does the school support those values? Is a student ready? Are they ready to be out on their own, right? They don't necessarily have had to live abroad or go somewhere and live away from home, but they have to show readiness to want to be away. We know that a lot of times the fear of going to a boarding school, well, there's excitement, but there is a fear about being away from mom and dad, being away from their friends, being away from what's normal and what's real to them. Are they interested in being a part of a diverse community, right? At Northfield Mount Hermon, we have 60 nations represented in our campus. We have 630 students, 60 nations, right? So we know that it's wonderful to have a diverse community, but we also know that that comes with a lot of challenges too, right? Everyone has their own ideas of the world, and we want to make sure that students are ready to be engaged, to be challenged, right? To have their own notions of their ideas of the world to be questioned, and be okay with that. We understand that, there's a lot of complex things happening in the world, and we want to make sure students can be a part of that diverse community. We want them to be engaged, right? Engaged in activities that the school can support. A lot of times I get students, especially coming abroad, where they say, I want to get involved in American football. We don't have American football. Or they might say, I want to join the squash team. Well, we don't have a squash team. However, we do have a fencing team, right? We also have an amazing basketball program. We have amazing soccer teams, right? So there's a lot of different things that we can support for students when they come into NMH. When they send in their application, oftentimes they'll send in a resume of experiences, but we're not looking for just a list of activities, right? That list only goes so far. I want to see at what depth you do something and maybe why you do it. Show us, tell us. The things that I typically look for when I'm looking at an application: leadership, service, character. These things matter to us, right? It's not necessarily the level you're doing it, right? Obviously, we can bring in really strong basketball players, but are they going to add something as in leadership to the campus? Are they going to be characters in the dorm? Good characters, for that matter, right? Do they want to provide service outside of their classroom experience? These are some of the pictures I pulled up. Our students are always engaged in service. We have a work program on our campus. So there's a foundation of service that they have just through the work program, where every student has a job on campus. And like I said before, what are the things that you do that the school can also support? Right? We have an amazing music program. So if a student wants to come in and play music, they can do that. They want to go skiing, they want to learn how to ski, right? They can do that too. I also mentioned the fencing program too, which is fairly new for us. So we're excited to kind of offer something different and new for our students. So a lot of the application process is asking yourself questions, right? It's asking yourself, what do I want? What am I good at? What do I want to explore? How do I want to get better at something? And what do I want to, at what level do I want to keep doing that? I tell students, to show your curiosity in the application, right? Show us that you can be a critical thinker in ways that you might not necessarily see in a transcript, right? A transcript is static. It gives us the grades, the final result, okay? When you start to describe a little bit more about what you do and why you do something, things like discussing the outside coursework or just basic independent studies that you've done on your own. I ask kids all the time in my interviews, I say, what is the thing that you want to study that you've never had a chance to study formally before? What thing do you typically go research when you have free time, right? Show us those things, talk about those things. Those are important. How has family, friends, and the world that you've lived in influenced your views of the world, right? Talk about that in an essay. And how have you stepped outside your comfort zone, right? What are the things that you do that have pushed you and challenged you to start to think a little bit broader and more critically about your own communities or the world beyond? So the readiness piece, right? I talked about, we want to see that students are ready for being away from home, being a part of a diverse community, and really challenging themselves. Right? Are they ready to be away from home? Do they want to be part of that global community? Do they want to engage in courses which are really designed to challenge them? Right? We believe challenge is important, but we also believe that it's important to have that safety net, right? Because students can get challenged and feel really out of sorts, right? So we want to make sure that there are support networks there available for students if they're feeling too challenged. Do they want to be a scholar, artist, athlete? Right? Those are important things to us, not just coming into NMH to play hockey, not just coming into NMH to play music, right? But to be a true academic mind and also to be able to balance it out and do other things as well. Leadership is something that, again, we look at, but I also sometimes ask students in an interview, what do you think of a leader? Like, what's the thing that comes to mind, the image when you think of a leader, right? Don't give me the words. Give me an image, right? And there's a lot of times they'll say, well, it's somebody who's leading a group up a hillside, right? It's somebody who's standing up in front of a group like myself speaking, right? Somebody who has some knowledge about something that the other group doesn't have. One thing that a young woman told me one time, which I thought was a fantastic answer, was the idea of a leader when she thought about it was somebody reaching their hand out and grabbing someone else. That to me spoke to her character, right? So do you want to engage in dialogue with other people? Do you want to create your own music? Do you want to be somebody who can engineer your own experience? These are all images of students on our campus. This last one here is we have an incredible music and performing arts program where students get to basically be the behind the scenes folks and do all the lighting and sound for performances. We have a student in my dorm right now who came into NMH with no performing arts experience as a ninth grader. In the spring of his ninth grade year, he stood up on stage for the first time with his friends because we have this one-act festival that we do. And it's basically a time when students put together their own plays and they get to come up and get their friends up on stage and perform, a 20-minute piece, right? He now is the lead in every single play that we have. So he did something where he stepped outside his comfort zone. He found a passion on stage, right? We also have other students who join musical ensembles. They might have an instrument that they're already playing, but they decide, you know what? I'm going to join the percussion ensemble. Because why? Percussion, rhythm is the base of music, right? So we have a percussion ensemble in place for students who want to do that. Incredible dance company, right? Where students can actually choreograph their own dances and have their friends then perform those. So they are leaders in that sense. A lot of athletes, Certainly get a lot of athletes on campus, but we also get those that are really interested in civics and being a part of their communities, getting out and doing service around voting opportunities. And like I said, we have students who are doing stuff at a very high level. And the picture I use for that obviously is kind of cliche, but we want students to obviously reach higher and think about what they want to do. So service is the other thing I really like, because what it does is it tells me that students have a character trait in them that is empathetic. It's a character trait that is also compassionate. They're thinking beyond their own bubbles, right? So service is something, to me personally, that I engaged in when I was a young 7th, 8th grader that still resonates with me today. I can't walk past a homeless person without giving them a piece of food, right? Because I worked in a homeless shelter when I was in 7th grade. So that mentality, that sort of idea of service, that giving back to not just individuals, but to entire communities is important. Just some other pictures I'll show you. We have a really great program. This is one of my favorite programs here with our Spanish and French classes. At the level 3 class, they can take what's called Spanish service learning or French service learning. And they go into the local public schools, my son being one of these students who gets to have the NMH students come in and teach him. So they teach Spanish and French to the local public schools. Character, right? Show us yourself. We're all different, right? We all have different ideas. We all have different passions, different interests. What is it that makes you different, right? I think that a lot of times, we think about character and we think that, students need to be outgoing, right? They need to be leaders and out in front of everyone, like I was talking about earlier. They don't have to be, right? We have plenty of students who are introverted. We have plenty of students who don't identify as athletes, who are not going to be joining the varsity teams, but they have strong character in other ways. And they're leaders in the dorms, right? They're the quiet leaders that we talk about. Are you someone who's going to lift someone else up? This is a picture of a boy, one of my favorite students here from a couple of years ago, Babacar. He was from Senegal. This was the semifinals of our championship tournament in soccer, right? Playing another school, the kid went down. He lifted him up and carried him off the field. That to me is leadership, right? Because every other player on both teams saw that happen. Every coach, every person who was watching that game watched that happen. And I'm so glad that we snapped that photo. My son was at that game, actually, and still to this day talks about Babacar carrying the boy off the field. So I think those types of things are really important. We want to see that students have true character and are really wanting to be a part of showing others how to be true characters. So it's important as you go around and think about what schools or what you want in a school to think about that community, right? Do your research. Ask hard questions, okay? There are lots of times when I get students who come to me in the interviews or at fairs, and they say, and it's totally fine to ask these questions. I'm not saying it's not bad, but they'll say, what do you do on the weekends? Guess what? Everyone has something to do on the weekends. Every school is going to have movies. Every school is going to have field trips. What I think was more important is how might you ask a different question around what you do on the weekends? You might ask, are there leadership opportunities for people on the weekends? Right? You might ask things like, what types of students do you find are best suited for a school like NMH? And my answer is, there are all kinds of students. We have 630. They're all different, right? Yes, they have some similar passions, but they're all different in a lot of ways. So talk to the students, right? When you visit schools or you go online, a lot of times, like we have a program where students can chat with other students. We also have a program where it's called Peer Pal, where the parents can also talk with other parents. They can send emails and they can engage in dialogue with each other. So talk to the students, talk to alums, right? You might know somebody who's gone to a certain school. Ask them about their experience at that school, but also ask them about what's the experience overall in boarding school, right? And if you can visit the campus, it's really important because when you visit the campus, you get a sense for that full rhythm. You understand sort of where students are at, what types of students are there. And I know that a lot of times students will visit certain schools and they may or may not see somebody that feels like their friend, right? That's important. Who are the students that are coming to this school? Do they look like somebody that I can be with, right? And then also connecting with the adults, right? Obviously, you're going to connect with the admissions office. That's your first point of contact. But talk to the admissions office. Ask them if there are teachers they can reach out to. Ask them if there are coaches or other instructors that they can reach out to. So with that being said, I'm going to hand it off to the rest of you all to ask any questions about sort of what we look for in students or in an application, for example. So is there anything out there that people are curious about? That means I did my job.
Questions?
Yeah, do you have a question?
Service, and in the application, you also look at the score of the during the grade.
Yes.
In the application, right? Because you mainly mentioned the leadership, service, and character.
Yes.
So
the reason why I mentioned those things was
Yes.
because those are these almost times the intangibles,
okay,
right? The things that we don't necessarily get from a transcript or the test score, right? So we can see transcripts and we can see test scores all day long, but they don't tell us how a student is going to be on campus, right? I've seen students with straight A's, almost perfect scores, but they've sat in their rooms for 4 years and played video games when they're not doing their homework, right? So we want students to be out there. We want them to be a part of the community. We want them to be, engaged in a variety of opportunities. So that's why I put those things up. But yes, grades are important, right? Those are going to be the first and foremost things that we're going to look at, because those are going to help us determine whether or not a student can be academically fit for our curriculum. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Makes
Okay.
sense.
Good question. What else?
And one more
Yeah.
thing on this, because if the kid, for example, like my boy, he's
Mhm.
grade 6, for example, if this community service,
Yeah.
how can, if he don't, let's say next 2 years in this community service,
Yep.
so is he need to, practically participate some, to be ready, or it is
What I say to students and to families, actually, really,
for family from do
Yeah.
we need to support him or give him more opportunity, or
it's important to do those things, but follow their lead. If they're not that type of person,
that's all.
right?
Do we push them to, because this is
No.
one of the
Yeah.
interview, you will ask what service you did, and then do we
You got to have this, that, and the other,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Mr. J said you got to have all these things.
do we push them to, or
I would say never push a child to do anything they don't want to do.
okay,
And
or
that
encourage, let's say don't push,
encourage them.
encourage
Yes,
is- okay.
absolutely. But I always tell families, follow the student's lead. If they want to play a sport, let them play that sport. If they want to take on an instrument and that's what they want to do, let them do that, right? Because when a student comes to me and starts talking about their passions, I can tell whether or not they've been told to do it.
So we told, or
And whether or not they're
you
actually
can
really
figure out,
interested.
You can figure out.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So I think that's important, that, it's not about pushing your child to do something because it's the right thing to do for the application. Make sure that it's authentic, right? And that's I guess how to sum it all up is to be as authentic as possible, right? Show your true self throughout this. And that can mean a lot of things. I had a great conversation with a student recently. Actually, I was up at the Saudi Aramco fair just the other day, and a student told me about this story where she was working with sea turtles out in Ras Sonora, right? And she was helping to protect the sea turtles. And I said, that's great. I said, so why do you do that? She said, well, I care about them. I care about the environment. I said, okay, so now let's talk about how that plays into your character. What does working with sea turtles tell me about who you are, right? It tells me you're empathetic. It tells me you care. It tells me that you're somebody who's passionate about something bigger than yourself, like the environment, right? So I say use your experiences and your activities to define what your character is. Does that make sense? Yeah. So I do think that it's important that people, when they're filling out applications, to not just tell us what they do, but then define it a little bit further. Like use those things to tell us a little bit more about who you are as an individual.